This evening on the bench I've got this FM tuner made by a company called Fidelity. It's their model T1. This tuner was around in the sort of the very late 80s, early 90s from what I remember. A friend of mine had one. So it's a British company that quite famous for their amplifiers, and a lot of their gear is very high quality. And this was a sort of mid-entry level tuner, not a budget tuner, but certainly not a high-end tuner. Quite a nice looking sort of thing. It's still got that slightly look of a sort of like a typical British built piece of gear from the 80s, slightly sort of RS components, power switch, that sort of thing. They were quite well regarded in their time. You don't hear a lot about them now. I think there's lots of tuners out there that perform probably better. And one of the comments I always heard from a friend of mine was he always thought that the sound was a little bit sort of lackluster, a bit sort of dull, a bit uninspiring, I suppose. Now, I've no idea the performance or the circuits that are inside this unit. I've had a quick look to see if I can find any information on the internet, and there's no data at all on the circuits inside, similar to the Roxanne, and a lot of the British companies keep their secrets, keep their circuits under lock and key, basically, just to stop the Chinese from copying them and ripping all their ideas off, which I can totally understand. I think that's a good idea. So yeah, it's turned up tonight. It was cheap on eBay, as all my stuff is. This is a working condition tuner in pretty perfect, more nearest perfect condition actually. No problem at all. Display is a little bit dim. I don't know if you can see that there. It's a bit weak, but it is, in fairness, it has been sitting in the car all day and it's been very cold. I plugged it in and switched it on, and yeah, it certainly works, and it's making sound okay. One thing I did notice when I selected the stereo option, the stereo light shows it's getting an MPX signal. It took well, initially it sounded like it was still playing mono, and slowly you could hear some sort of separation between left and right, but it was I don't know, it just sounded like the MPX circuits aren't aligned properly. Now that could be because it's so bloody cold. It's still cold to the touch, and it's not really a fair test. But what I wanted to do is have a look inside this tuner, have a look, see if we can work out how the circuit's working, and maybe see if we can certainly once it's warmed up, check its alignment, and have a listen to it, because I'll be interested to see what it does actually sound like, if it does indeed sound a bit sort of lackluster. But it could have been just the the tuner. I think my friend used to compare them with tuners I had that maybe were a little bit brighter and a little bit more dynamic. But I do remember him playing this tuner, and it always did sound a bit uninspiring. So on the back there's not a lot to it really. It's a pretty sort of standard feature. No special sockets for like MPX out or anything like that. You've got your power lead on the right hand side, your Ferner leads, and your standard type aerial socket on the front. So I suppose the first thing to do is to I'll pop the cover off it and we'll have a look inside and see if there's anything of any interest in there. Okay, someone's obviously been in here before because the screws weren't that tight, and I can't see any signs of anything horrendous going on in here. So let's have a quick look through, see what we've got. So this is obviously our RF amplifier. Looks like two-stage RF amplifier, so it should be fairly sensitive. So local oscillator here, trimmer for the high frequency and low frequency, and then we've got, it's interesting, these QA stickers, the AM's been checked. It looks like everything else has been ignored. No one's signed anything for that. Doesn't necessarily mean it hasn't passed QA, of course. And then we've got our FM in IF3 amplifiers here. Pretty standard sort of layout really, to be honest with you. FM adjustment for the VCO here. Can't adjust that because we've got no idea of what's happening. Stereo separation control just here. These two coils at the back of the 19 kilohertz traps for the IF filter, and this looks like the what is it? Come on, pre-emphasis circuits here for the audio output. Power supply section, pretty straightforward. Linear regulators. Having a look, see what component, what capacitors they use in here. Looks like these capacitors. God, isn't it? You know, this is the trouble with this British gear. You'd expect them to use good quality components, but what the hell are these capacitors? WC capacitors. Water closet, I suppose that must stand for. So they're using cheap quality components, which is a bit of a disappointment really. You'd expect them to use something half reasonable. What are these? Are these Rubicons on these orange things? It's a sheeter by the looks of it. Okay, so they're not too bad, but half of these capacitors are bloody rubbish, you know. Well, don't say that, but it looks like one of these one hung load type, sort of low quality components. So yeah, I mean, it's all fairly basic inside. Nothing particularly flash about it. So I suppose the thing to do is I need to let the tuner warm up and see if we can actually get the stereo separation to work a bit better. We've got a stereo separation pot here, but I can adjust that with my stereo signal generator once the tuner has sort of reached sort of a reasonable operating temperature, and see what it's like. This all looks like the AM adjustment, because is it an AM? No, it's just an FM, isn't it? So this is probably discriminator, FM discriminator. We've got two diodes anywhere for the discriminator. Can't see any, I must admit. We've got these little IF filters. These are little IF filters by the looks of it. Yes, they're capacitors. They might be capacitors actually. I guess they were IF filters, but I can't be sure. So yeah, fairly straightforward layout. Nothing too exciting in here that I can see. A couple of things here for measuring voltages for memory and things like that. Minus 17 volts. Looks like your mains comes in and is, yeah, we've got at least the power switch. That's what I do like to see. The power switch is actually cutting the primary of the transformer, so when you turn it off, it really is off, not just sort of pseudo off sort of thing. And a bit sort of how's your father connections on the back here, bolted straight to the base plate. Very typical British styling of sort of homemade Heathkit sort of style. So aerial input, I like that. That's nice and chunky. And that feeds into the front end. So yeah, let's let this thing warm up, and then we'll plug it onto the signal generator and check a few things and see how it performs. Well, I'll show you another slightly interesting thing with this tuner. If I tune to 87.5 on my signal generator, 7.5 megahertz, so there's no carrier. Just increase it to fairly strong signal. Frequency 87.5 megahertz. RF level 100 millivolts. Okay. Put a mono signal in. That's my call for dinner. This is the first tuner I've ever come across that's microphonic. Can you hear that? I'll show you what it is. This oscillator coil. That's crap. And so I've never come across a tuner that's microphonic, unless it's valve tuners, yeah, or tube tuners, yeah, but not. So if you've got this near your speakers or anything like that, it's going to really affect the sound quality. That's pretty poor actually, and it's basically down to the fact that it's FM modulating the oscillator, because the oscillator is shifting frequency. This could do with all being damped. Obviously it's going to be better with the cover on it, but it's still microphonic, and a bit of a disappointment that really. I've never come across that before. Right, as there's no manual for this, I'm just going to have a bit of a tweak, see if I can get the sensitivity up a bit. It's not bad, but it's not great either. It seems to be a bit sort of susceptible to noise on a normal FM aerial, where other tuners seem to be, I don't know, a bit quieter than it. So this is the local oscillator section. This is your low frequency coil for the low frequency end, like 87.5 megs. This is the high frequency trimming capacitor for the high frequency. All I'm going to do is I'm going to feed in the signal to the radio from my signal generator. You see the signal generator at 87.5 megahertz. And all I'm going to do is adjust it for maximum signal strength. So I'm ramping the signal up until I get a signal indication on the radio. Select, make sure I've got the right. There you go. Okay, there's our signal there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the signal down to the light just goes out. Okay, and then up one. Now I'm adjusting the core here, this core here, for maximum signal. Okay, so I'm putting that center point. So now I'm going to drop the attenuator back on the signal generator. You can see the light's gone out. I'm going to readjust that signal coil again. There it is, back again. Oh, that's perfect, just flickering. That's spot on for the local oscillator. The Marconi's been on for an hour now, so its local oscillator, its oven oscillator will be on frequency. So we go to 108 megahertz and tune the radio to 108. Looking for the signals, nothing on the signal, so I'm just going to adjust that trimming capacitor there. Try and get that back into to illuminate. There we go. That's good. So we've improved that already. Back our RF level back. So we go RF signal. Drop that back a bit. And drop it back just until we get the light go out. Okay. About there. And so we can get it to come back on with the trimming capacitor. Yep, we did. So we're improving this slightly. Drop the level back further. Okay, got quite an improvement here by the looks of it. Just this capacitor again. Okay, about there. So that's pretty good. I'm going to go back to 108. Sorry, but Gamma Freak's about to 87.5, 87.5 megahertz. Might have to increase the RF level slightly until we get the light back on again. I'm just going to go through that stage one more time. Okay, give that a tweak again. Okay, back the level down a bit further. That's gone out. Just in this core again. Okay. Carrier frequency 108 megahertz. Adjust the RF level. The same thing again. Trimming capacitor. Okay, need more signal. Increase the signal. More signal. You've gone too far with the RF level. Okay. So that's it. That should be the FM oscillator correctly aligned. Now all I'm going to do now, because I'm not going to mess about these cores, I'm just going to adjust the front ends trimming capacitors. So we're going to go to leave it on 108. We'll just listen to the hiss, and also we're just going to trim these capacitors from the similar thing we're doing now, just get as much signal strength as we can, as much sensitivity as possible. Okay, so we'll drop our level back slightly. That was more or less spot on, that one. Next one. Let's improve slightly, let's drop the level back. Okay, a bit further. A bit more. Okay, improvements being made on that one. Next one. Bring a bit of a sod, that one. There we go. That's pretty good as well. So that's it. That's in theory aligned the front end. Now the other controls here are really I'm not going to touch. These look like IF cans. I don't know the spec when setting up the sweep. The FM is usually the same. You set the high end and the low frequency for maximum sensitivity. I'm not touching the IF cores. This is the VCO tracking. I've got no information on what voltages to set, so you can't touch any of that, so just leave that alone. It's interesting enough, the stereo separation control doesn't seem to make any difference at all. Likewise, I'm not going to touch the discriminator, because the discriminator should be set fine, shouldn't be a problem. We can check that by feeding in the signal and looking at the distortion, but basically the tuner seems to be working fine. I need to connect it up now and see what it sounds like. Okay, one other thing I'm going to do is to make an improvement on this tuner is to try and stop this thing from being microphonic. So I'm just going to dump a load of glue in this winding, and that should hopefully stop it from ringing. A bit of glue on there and allow that to set. Now that should stop. See, the glue's relaxing into the winding. So that will act as a damper and hopefully reduce the microphonicity. We'll try that once the glue's set, and that should, as I say, overall improve the thing overall. Okay, to sum up, a nice looking tuner, but nothing special at all. Cheap Chinese components inside. You've seen a couple of the capacitors look like they've been swelling. Microphonic front end, which is not great for high fidelity reproduction. If you've got this tuner near a loudspeaker and things like that, it will seriously affect the sound quality of the tuner. So yeah, lackluster tuner really. Cheap internals and a nice looking exterior, and I think people fall for that sort of thing. So I think if it was my choice, I'd go and buy a sort of like a cheap Japanese tuner and get probably the same sort of performance. It would, well, better sensitivity, and you certainly wouldn't get the microphonic effects. I've never come across that on another FM tuner, but that was quite severe. So yeah, thanks for watching. More to come.